The new college football landscape means it's always a busy off season with recruiting, of course, but the transfer portal and look at a college football playoff schedule for 2024 and 25 and specific items, of course, for the Buckeyes. Welcome into Ohio State Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Kevin Noon's on the line. Glad to see Kevin because we got the rest of the crew out and about here and there. So catch Kevin's work at Buckeye Huddle and the Big Me podcast. Kevin, how you doing today?
Doing great. Yeah, I actually did a Big Me podcast live show yesterday, so people gave me some grief. It was like, "Where have you been?" So, we're off to a good start.
Nice. Well, Caleb Brown's off to somewhere, most likely. Of course, there's always the possibility to come back to same school in the transfer portal, but that does not happen often. And what somebody is getting, despite a lack of experience with only one catch last season, is a top 75 ranking coming out of high school, a top 10 or 15 position as a wide receiver. So a lot of talent going somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the second receiver following Caleb Burton into the portal out of Chicago, Illinois, 5'10", buck 97. This one surprised me a little bit. Now, I've long been saying Ohio State's going to have to adjust its numbers, and that means kids transferring out. But I didn't have a story ready for Caleb Brown. Let's put it that way. I didn't expect that one. Had a couple people ask me what I thought. It's like, I don't know. I think he's kind of right on that cut line. Saw a good dose of him during spring football, but I guess, you get that opportunity, you get some things on tape, and now you go off to the portal and see what happens. And I think it's just going to be kind of commonplace where when you look at the receiver recruiting that Ohio State's had, if you can't get onto the field in that small little window of opportunity you're given, you might get recruited over. And that's saying a lot with Caleb Brown, as you had mentioned, being a top 75 type of national player.
Yeah, so one more in the transfer portal from Ohio State, one out, one in, and most likely much more needed, of course, based on position and experience. So Josh Simmons comes in from San Diego State as an offensive tackle. We all felt pretty good based on indicators going into the process, and sure enough, he lands with the Buckeyes as a guy who logged like 800 snaps last season.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he redshirted in 21, and then he was a starter in 2022, 6'6", 305, out of Helix High School. I believe Reggie Bush went to high school there. It is a San Diego area powerhouse in terms of some of the kids that have come out of there. Josh Simmons, certainly not a guy that you just sit there and say, well, you just wind him up and put him out there. He's going to have to show some things. There certainly were some shortcomings in his game. He would be the first person to admit it. But, now Ohio State has the opportunity maybe to put Simmons out there at right tackle where you would have Josh Fryer at left, or maybe you see what happens with a Zen Mahalski or a Tegra Shabola. But, this certainly gives them another body. But let's not forget, too, they went out and got Vic Cutler, and we're really not talking about him yet at this point of how he fits in. So, you don't know, and at least Cutler had the benefit of going through spring practice with Ohio State. Now, Josh Simmons, he's finishing up finals at San Diego State, and he should be to Ohio State by the end of the month. He'll be able to go through a lot of summer workouts and things, but he's not going to have the 15 practice structure that other guys did. So, I don't want to be the person coming out and saying, well, don't think that this is something that immediately solves the issue. The issue is still kind of there. Josh Simmons is just another piece on the chessboard to see if he can solidify the line.
Offensive lineman Steve coming to Columbus. We got Steve Hellwagon, of course, on the line from 247 Sports. Buck Nuts, catch him right there. So Josh Simmons, a welcome addition, Steve.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And we don't know how it's all going to shake out. Could this be like Jonah Jackson from Rutgers, who came in the summer and earned a starting spot? We don't know. But it was obvious listening to Ryan Day after spring football was over that he wasn't happy with the play of the offensive tackles. Like the days that we were there, they really struggled in pass protection. So, it just he's adding another body to the situation. and gives them another option. And at worst, he becomes maybe their sixth offensive lineman for this year. And if he doesn't start at tackle, at some point, I think he could also possibly play guard in the Big Ten level as well. So he's got 3 years of eligibility left. So I think there's a lot of meat on that bone. And I think it was a great addition. I think at this 11th hour, so to speak, 4 months to go before the season starts, to get him even after spring football, I think it'll help the team, no doubt.
Of us are on the internet pretty much all the time. It's fun. You get to socialize, you get entertained, and in this day and age, it's pretty much necessary. And even if you're one of those people that's not on the internet all the time, you know what is? Your personal information. And there are people out there trying to hack you all the time. They want your email address, they want your phone number, they want your place of employment, and they want to do bad things with it. There's also fairly legitimate corporations and companies that want your information. They want it for marketing purposes. They're going to buy it, they're going to sell it, they're going to trade it. At the very least, it's annoying to you. It's a nuisance, it's aggravating. Your email gets cluttered up with spam email. You get robocalls all the time. That's at the very least. At the worst, it's a threat to your family, to your friends, to your personal information, to your banking, to your finances, to your security, to your safety, to your identity. It can be pretty serious. This video is sponsored by Aura. I got hacked and it was pretty obvious. This was about 8 or 9 months ago. And there were red flags all over the place. And I didn't exactly know what to do, but I knew I needed to do something quickly. I mean quickly. I researched 8, 10, or 12 companies immediately. I went all over the place. I asked people. I was online looking for the best company that could serve my needs and secure my information. You know who I found? Aura. And I'm glad I did. It was amazing. I contacted them. They got right back to me immediately. Their customer support is phenomenal. Their customer service is first-rate, friendly. They are detailed. They know what they're doing, and they do it right, and they will protect you. In addition to everything I just mentioned, they've got a password-keeping service. They keep your credit score. They notify you anytime there's a possible data breach. This has happened to me a number of times. I'm getting notifications all the time when there's a possible compromise to my credit score or anything that I don't want. They've got a VPN that will allow you to browse the internet anonymously. It's amazing. And again, customer service support available 24/7. Click the link in the description section below and get 2 free weeks of Aura. Protect your finances, protect your information, protect your privacy, protect your identity. I did, and I'm glad I did. Aura, thank you so much for what you've done for me. And now for my Voice of College Football community. It's kind of funny because Aura approached us a couple of weeks ago to sponsor. And I said, you know what? I use Aura. So that doesn't happen too often. I said, yeah, they were great. I had some issues, some red flags, and bam, they cleaned them up and took care of me. And this was like about a year ago. So, hey, I can talk directly to that. So that's always a good thing.
Great testimonial, no doubt.
All right, Steve, you missed the conversation on one Caleb Brown, but as Kevin and I were addressing, one man's eighth wide receiver on the roster could be somebody's 1, 2, or 3 pretty immediately at a decent school because he's got that kind of talent.
Yeah, playing the role of Jamison Williams today will be Caleb Brown because I think we're going to hear that kind of talk wherever he lands. We're going to hear, man, Ohio State missed out on a good one here. And then all the Ohio State people will come back with, he wasn't going to play here this year, just like the Jamison Williams talk was a couple of years ago. I watched Caleb during the spring, and he just seemed like he made a lot of plays, and it seemed like Brian Hartline was coaching him hard and really pushing him to be the best wide receiver he could be. And he was also pretty involved, it seemed, in the return game. And so for him to pop up on this list, that floored me. I just couldn't believe it. I just figured, okay, maybe he'd be in the 2 deep at wide receiver this year. And then after all the guys left after this upcoming year, he'd be a 2-year starter or a one big year starter and go on to the NFL himself. And he ain't waiting around apparently. So Caleb Brown, we hardly got to know ye, unfortunately, but I think he is a guy that could come back to bite him one day, helping somebody do something really big somewhere. I think he's got that kind of capability, but again, you have that kind of talent in a room like this. There's going to be some guys slip out occasionally, and looks like that's what the case is with Caleb Brown. They're still, if we believe Lorenzo Styles Jr. would be a scholarship player, which I think if there's a scholarship there, they're going to give it to him. There's some talk he might pay his own way to help them with their scholarship crunch. They're 2 over if you count him as a scholarship player right now. But I think the wiggle room, even though the portal is closed, is that guys who graduate can transfer and be immediately eligible. So some of those 3rd or 4th year guys may get their degree from Ohio State, and perhaps it's already, wink, wink, nod, nod in the pipeline that those guys, once they're done with their degree, will declare for the portal and be immediately eligible as graduate transfers elsewhere. That's how I would see this shaking out. I don't have specific names for you, but I would think that that's possibly, because otherwise, barring an appeal to the NCAA, I don't think, short of graduating, anybody who enters now would be eligible for the fall. But you can put what I know about the rules in a thimble, I guess.
And don't forget about medical hardships too. Harry Miller took a medical hardship when he retired from football, and I think that there's a potential of 1 or 2. I mean, I don't want to speak a lot of names out there, but one I will, because it's been publicly talked about his battles with Avery Henry dealing with cancer, whether or not his future has football. I mean, I certainly don't want to usher him out the door if the goal of getting back out in the football field is there, but he seems to be somebody. Honestly, I don't think that Ohio State is sitting there as worried as everybody else is about where they are in terms of getting to 85. I think they have a plan, but let's remember there are other names out there via the portal that still could come into Ohio State. Tywone Malone, the Ole Miss defensive tackle, just took a visit this last week to Ohio State, supposed to visit Miami this weekend and then make a decision. And then Ohio State is supposedly getting a visit from a defensive back out of UAB. I don't think Ohio State is running 1 or 2 for that guy, to be quite honest, but Ohio State did make his top 6. So it's a constantly moving number, and it's very difficult to keep track of.
Ohio State's numbers in the NFL draft were impressive once again, not necessarily from sheer volume, with only 6 draftees, and that's a low number by Buckeye standards, but 4 in the first 3 rounds. And of course, CJ Stroud just won from the top spot at the very top of the draft. And as Yakov points out here, thank you so much for the contribution. CJ Stroud's state tax bill, $0, huge bonus. And he has received a huge bonus as well. Steve from the Houston Texans. So it's CJ Stroud off the board first.
Yeah, and congratulations to him. For the last couple of weeks, we talked about all the negativity that kind of led up to the draft with CJ Stroud and allegedly blowing off the Manning camp and not failing really well on the C2 test or whatever that was. But Houston Texans, gold star to them for looking past all of the rhetoric and finding a guy that can play football. So congratulations to them and congratulations to him. I think he's going to do an outstanding job with the Houston Texans, provided that they're able to put an offensive line in front of him and wide receivers for him to throw to. I think that he'll fit in and do an outstanding job there. Since Deshaun Watson left a couple years ago, they had kind of a stopgap guy. I think Mills was his name as their starting quarterback. And honestly, they haven't tried to win football games there in a couple of years, as they've kind of, gone through this rebuild, reload situation. They haven't made the playoffs probably in 4 years. So only 6 times in their existence. So it's a blank canvas for him to paint, and a low bar for him to say he's going to be the greatest quarterback in Houston Texans history. If he just strings together 5 or 6 pretty good years, he might be that guy. So to me, he's off and running. I think I checked the contract last year for the number 2 player was Aiden Hutchinson. He got 4 years at about $36 million. So that's what Stroud is looking at probably to start out. All 3 guys, Stroud, Paris Johnson, Smith-Njigba, probably all looking at guaranteed money in the realm of about $75 million for the threesome. So those are nice round numbers that Ryan Day and the boys can share with potential recruits that our first round class left and just made $75 million guaranteed. Paris Johnson, obviously number 6 overall to the Arizona Cardinals. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba, number 20 overall to the Seattle Seahawks. And probably would have gone in the top 10 had he been healthy all year and had a fine year. But still, for him to come out January to March and April and show what he was capable of doing athletically, that was a huge thing for Smith-Njigba to still go in the first round. I thought Harrison dropping to the 3rd round made sense. And then the Cleveland Browns, really bullish on our Ohio State Buckeyes all of a sudden. They've had Denzel Ward and Tommy Togiai on their roster, but they automatically doubled that with DeJuan Jones and Luke Whippler, the 2 offensive linemen who were drafted. And then signed a couple safeties, Ronnie Hickman and Tanner McAllister as undrafted free agents as well. And they'll have an outside chance of maybe making the team as well. So really good to see those guys. And, 6 guys drafted this year, Mark. They could have 6 taken in the first round next year. It's looks like it's going to be a crazy haul for Ohio State in the mock drafts already out there for next year.
Absolutely. And a lot of detractors are pointing to the defense, saying we're the defensive players. And that does speak to the lack of defensive prowess in recent years, but it also speaks to the youth on the defense. And I think we are going to see a lot of defense coming off the board in the next couple of years. And of course, Steve, as you like to track, Ohio State leads the all-time first-round selections. They have widened the gap over USC 90-85.
Yep, 90 all time. They'll be the first one to 100 too. When you figure that they'll probably have at least 5 next year, that'll get them to 95. So in 2025 or 2026, they'll be pushing that 100 mark. So it just keeps perpetuating itself, 1 year after another.
Kevin, Michigan fans are proud of their 9 draftees, and I get it. You can beat your chest and so forth, but there's a reason sometimes when one school makes a big deal out of a numbers lead like that, because it never happens.
Let me turn off the mute. Yeah, that happens. And, the reality is you're kind of held to how many draft eligible players you have. I mean, to be quite honest, that are in the mix. So that's why I always look at draft trends over periods of time, more so than just the 1 year. I mean, it's going to be very different. Next year, Ohio State, as Steve had mentioned, could put 5, 6 guys into the first round. I mean, I've seen mock drafts that have had not 9 in the first round, but I've seen 9 different Buckeyes pre-mocked into the first round. So it could be a crazy year if Ohio State wins the national championship. If you're draft eligible, you're generally heading to the door at that point because you've got your natty, and now it's time to just to go on there. But yeah, Michigan did have 9 draftees, and tip your cap to them a little bit and say, well, there you go. But Ohio State had 3 first rounders. Michigan had 1. And in my opinion, Mozzie Smith to the Cowboys in the first round was a reach. But, it is what it is. And if Jerry Jones wants to take a player who is kind of a third down run stuffer and draft him in the first round and ignore a bunch of other needs, it's his team and he can do whatever. But I might be looking for a new team to pull for this year, and it has nothing to do with the Michigan guys. It just has to do with the inept general manager who happens to be the owner.
He also made a move to get Deuce Vaughn at one point, and I love watching Deuce Vaughn play college football, but I've got to wonder the connections made there because of his father working in the front office, whether that kind of leaned things in a certain direction past a few other more worthy players. But we will continue on the NFL draft theme here for the Buckeyes. Luke Whippler kind of fell into a position that we had kind of feared for him when he declared himself eligible. So he almost fell completely out of the draft, but about 50 from the bottom at 190 to the Browns, as you mentioned, Steve. But he would look good in a Buckeyes uniform again for one more go around.
Yeah, unfortunate for him. I mean, there were a lot of people who thought maybe third round for him, and he just dropped. And I don't understand why. I don't know if it's his size. He started 2 seasons. I just don't know. I can't explain it. Maybe his workouts weren't that great. He seems like a guy that NFL personnel would gravitate to because he's got a tremendous personality. I don't know what the short circuit was on him. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he thought his
with short arms.
Short arms is the detractor. Yeah. But in those tight quarters, I don't think that really. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that really, makes that big a difference. But I guess they
get locked in on that kind of stuff. They
study everything,
size, whatever. And I was listening to a draft post-mortem call or something, and Whippler was brought up, and it was kind of the dreaded short arms situation. But he kind of was what he was, and now he's off into the NFL. And the truth of the matter is how much money is starting center at Ohio State going to get through NIL? Probably not a ton. So he's earning now, and you just kind of have to move forward. I understand the disappointment. He really would have solidified some issues for Ohio State if he would have stayed for another year, but it seemed like he was ready to go.
Yeah, I don't know what the Browns' situation is on their offensive line. Here it is. I actually had it called up. Ethan Pochik, was he an Iowa guy? Is that something right?
No, he was.
He's from LSU.
LSU, yeah.
LSU, okay. He was a number 2 draft pick by Seattle in 2017, and he's penciled in as the starting center now for the Browns. So, hopefully he can make the team. That's the big thing is just make the roster and go from there. I mean, if he does that, I guess we'll see. But it is what it is. He, as everybody said, he was done at Ohio State. He had served his time and was ready to move on. So some guys are like that. And Tommy Togiai, was in that same boat 2 years ago. He was done at Ohio State, didn't want to come back, and took off. Got taken by the Browns in the 4th round, and he's latched for 2 years there. So that'll be kind of the blueprint. Can Whippler do the same thing? And if you can play football, they'll find a spot for you. I don't have any doubt about that. I think Whippler will be fine. If it's with the Browns or with somebody else, however it turns out, I think he'll latch on somewhere, and just go from there. As I said, he's got ton of heart and a ton of personality, and that'll take you a long way. If you're willing to do the work.
Some of these measurements that go to an extreme remind me of Flozell Adams, the Michigan State offensive tackle, who at one point dropped all the way out of the first round as one of the best offensive tackles in the draft because it was reported just a days before the draft that he had a slight hearing loss in one ear, and teams thought that he wouldn't be able to hear the snap counts, which he obviously could in college. And he then went on to start 200 games, 5 Pro Bowls, and was an All-Pro. So
yeah,
sometimes you get a little bit too wrapped up in your measurements, but watch the guys play. All right, Ryan Doss is bringing us back to the here and now with the Buckeyes. Ryan, thank you so much for the contribution. Do you guys think Devin Brown could start over Kyle McCord without it being injury related? And does Tristan Gebbia play more than just against Western Kentucky and Youngstown State?
When I look at that, I'll start with the second one. You're going to have a starter who's played very little football in terms of the collegiate game, whether it's Devin Brown or Kyle McCord. And you're going to have a backup who you're going to probably want to sit there and make sure that gets more than enough reps themselves, because if you're concerned about the offensive line, you're going to probably be concerned about how your quarterback's going to hold up, and just, the more physical nature of both of them in terms of having a little bit more run in their game. You're going to want to make sure that you're too deep for sure. I just don't know when you get Gebbia out there, outside of maybe, Western Kentucky, Youngstown State, Rutgers, those types of situations. I don't know if I'm really looking to split my carries or my snaps into three at that point. If you're trying to be focused on winning the season right now, I don't know what Tristan Gebbia is going to necessarily bring you. I mean, we can quickly say, well, Ohio State had to go to 3 quarterbacks in 14. Yeah, well, they lost one of them before the start of the season. It was really their backup when you look at it in terms of who they had healthy to start the year. So I'll say no on that one, Ryan. I just don't think that you play him that much more. And I'll leave the first half of the question to Steve, since I kind of took the whole second one.
Yeah, no doubt. If Devin Brown goes in there and he shows them he's the best guy, he's going to have to play. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I don't think the injury and him missing the last 2 or 3 practices of spring football factors into that decision at all. I think that Kyle McCord was put in some really difficult situations during the spring game, which the coaches wanted to see that. I mean, they want to see how he really is going to react when the bullets are flying. And in that case, there wasn't a lot of blitz pressure anyway, so it wasn't like all the bullets were flying, if that makes sense. So did he handle it? Well, he handled it to a degree, but he didn't nail it down by any means. He's number 1 right now, but that's subject to change. And I think if Devin Brown goes in and puts everybody on their ear and makes a quantum leap between now and August the 1st, which is entirely possible, if he gets out there and grinds every day and is throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. and these guys and Emeka Egbuka and all these guys as they get healthy, I mean, Devin Brown could go in there and set this coaching staff on their ear the first 2 weeks of preseason practice, to where, they come out week before the game and say it's going to be Devin Brown to take the first snap, but Kyle McCord will also play. I think both of them need some action in the Indiana, Western Kentucky, and Youngstown State games. That way you go into the game at Notre Dame feeling that, okay, we have a starter, but if he were to go down, or if he starts out 1 for 8 or whatever and throws a pick or 2 or whatever, and we need a spark, we can put the other guy in. And so, first of all, I think whoever it is going to do just fine. I think the people around them, even the offensive line, will come into shape, I think, in some form before the bullets really fly. So I think that'll help the process. But regarding Gebbia, I can't see him playing much, if at all, just because any meaningful snaps, you want number 2 to get those. I mean, he might go into, if they're up on Youngstown 58-6, maybe he'll go in with 2 minutes to go. But why would you put him in a game? I'm confused. He's got experience. He looked good in the spring, I thought, or looked good in the spring game. We didn't get to see him a whole lot during spring practice because the other 2 guys were taking most of the snaps. There really is no purpose to Tristan Gebbia taking any snaps on this team unless the first 2 guys are out. So, to me, that's kind of a non-starter with me. He's just there as the stopgap and as the guy with the ball cap on to put his arm around the guy when he comes off and say, did you see this? You could have seen that. We were in this. You didn't know that. this, that. I mean, that's his job, is to help coach up those young guys.
In 2021 at Michigan, we saw a live audition with the bullets firing between Cade McNamara and J.J. McCarthy during the non-conference schedule the brutal non-conference schedule of UConn, Hawaii, and Colorado State. Could we see something close to that? Because there's a 3-game cushion, albeit I'll give Indiana a bit more respect than that prior to Notre Dame.
I don't think you play it that way. I mean, maybe that works for Jim Harbaugh in that situation. I think that a lot of people I know up that way felt that it was already predetermined that it was going to be J.J. McCarthy, that they just wanted to have this look of, hey, we're giving you your opportunity. Thank you for your service last year and some of the wins that you're able to guide us to, but we're going to go with JJ. And short of the world being turned upside down, it wasn't going to change because, they had the type of resistance against going against a soft breeze with those 3 non-conference opponents. So I don't think there's anything for Ohio State to gain. I think there's everything to lose if you sit there and you go into game 1 of the season and it's like, well, we really don't know who we're going to play. You got to pick your horse and ride them before that point and have every game there. You can't sit there and say, okay, Kyle, you're going to go in the Indiana game, and then we're going to sit you for the entirety of the Youngstown State game or the Western Kentucky game and play Devin. And are you really doing Devin any favors by, jerking him around if the decision is to go to Kyle? So you can't make everybody happy. It's just kind of the situation. So if it ends up being Kyle, I think we see a decent amount of Devin, but you have to sit there and be focused on a guy until they force your hand to have to make a decision. Otherwise,
the college football playoff expands to 12 teams. Of course, in 2024, there's been much speculation about what that will look like, and we got a peek at it this week. And so let's keep you guys on the screen. Let's do that first. And let's give it a look here. So, Steve, what are your initial thoughts of a first round on campus, which we had anticipated based on the model being rolled out a year earlier? But one big game on Friday night, and then we got a triple header on Saturday on campus with maybe a noon, 3:30, and 7. And then the quarterfinals come back, and then we get to the bowl games and implement them for the quarterfinals. Then we've got an interesting semifinals because unlike now, we've got a game on Thursday, then a game on Friday instead of the doubleheader that we currently have. And of course, they're trying to avoid the NFL as much as possible with Tuesday and Wednesday's quarterfinal games, Thursday and Friday semifinal games, and then a national championship date that looks much like a Super Bowl date from 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts there. I think that this is a starting point for these 2 seasons. And I think what the talk in and around the sport is that by 2026, everybody will be starting the regular season in what's now known as week 0, the week before Labor Day, which would be on or about August 25th, thereabouts, 26, 27, whatever that date on the calendar will be in those years. The last weekend of August, that's not a Labor Day weekend. And to me, that will give us perhaps better spacing. And what that could allow is then the championship games, I guess, would then be played maybe Thanksgiving weekend, and then the first round of the playoff perhaps played the first weekend in December, and give better spacing to this. Because what you've shown me here is really a compact, jumbled mess. And it's just a television show, because they're going to start Labor Day weekend. They're going to end the regular season Thanksgiving weekend. They're going to play the championship games on December 3rd, 4th, the first weekend in December, whatever that date is. And it varies obviously year to year. And then there'll be a 2-week break. And then they're going to play the first round of the playoff on campus sites. At Ohio State, Gene Smith has talked about how Ohio Stadium may or may not be ready for that because of winterization. which, they played the OHSAA championship there the first weekend in December a couple of years. So you're talking about 2 weeks after what's been the last event that they've staged there in most years. Could it be at Ohio State, or would they move it to Indianapolis? I don't know. That's certainly been discussed. If Ohio State's outside the top 4 and is somewhere between 5 and 8 and has to host. So that's a thought. These guys who work out at this 48 weeks a year with very, very little downtime have now had their Christmas taken completely away. They'll be practicing on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, getting ready for these quarterfinal games, which will be played December 31st and January 1st. Thankfully, all of the first round and the quarterfinals are during non-academic times, thankfully, because school everywhere pretty much ends December the 10th, 12th with the exams for the fall semester or quarter. So that's good. It's not during academic periods, those first round and quarterfinals. But now we have really, really dipped into the second semester for the 4 teams that are in the playoff. And we've added basically 2 extra weeks for the 2 teams that make the national championship game. They're going to go all the way to January the 20th on this model here that's on the screen. So that impacts their academics in the second semester. You're talking about going to a semifinal spot for a Thursday game and a Friday game. That means you probably got to arrive there on Tuesday. So that entire week of classes is a wash for those players on those 4 teams. And thankfully, the national championship's on a Monday, so you could fly there on Friday night, have 2 days to get ready at the championship site, and then play the game Monday, and theoretically fly back Tuesday morning and only miss a couple of days of class with that. But again, you're going from 3 games in the current playoff, 2 semifinals, and a championship to 11 games because you got to eliminate 11 teams in this. And the TV contract for this should be just something outrageous. Whatever you've made for the 3 games, add in 8 more games. Obviously they're not going to draw the same kind of rating as the semifinals and championship game would draw, but they're going to draw pretty sizable ratings, particularly if you get some kind of spicy Alabama-Ohio State matchup in the quarterfinals. That's going to really do well. So you're going to make many millions more dollars in revenue, and that should all trickle down to the players. That's my original thought on all this, talking about student athlete welfare and paying these players what they've earned. If you're going to add weeks to the season on both ends, you need to pay the players. And I know that represents some Title IX issues, because if you're not going to pay the synchronized swimmers out of this pool, you may run afoul of Title IX. So I don't know. Those are all my thoughts on it. I'm sure Ohio State, I'm going to do a story going back. It's 25 full years now between the BCS and the playoff. 16 with one and 9 with the other now that we've had experience with. Out of those 25 years at the end of the regular season, I would think Ohio State's in the top 12 this glory period, probably 18, 20 times they would be in the playoffs. So nearly 80% of the time, and just about every year since the playoffs started in 14, they've been in the top 12. So Ohio State's a lock for this thing, guys. I like it.
Yeah,
how's it hit you, Kevin?
Nothing left to say.
I did all your work for you.
That's a dig at you, Steve. Shut up. You went too long. There's nothing left for me to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack there, and they're changing the sport right before our very eyes, and nobody can do anything about it because, again, they've turned the whole thing into a television show, and they are at the mercy of ESPN and Fox and whatever they're going to spend on this thing. And they're glad to be at the mercy of ESPN and Fox with this. And it's going to bring in so much money that, Ohio State ran a $40 million surplus this past year. They did have an extra home game. So, I think if they're smart, they're applying some of that surplus to the budget for the upcoming year when they only have 6 home games. But, they're making money hand over fist. They have a new TV contract and new playoff money coming. There's so much money there. It's time to share it with the people making the money, which are the student athletes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could get into the whole thing on that, but also remember athletic departments are competing against NIL collectives for a finite amount of dollars out there. So players are getting paid through NIL. I do believe that there needs to be some sort of compensation there, but I also don't believe that the universities are going to say, sure, we're already down on what we're receiving from giving campaigns. Let's not take this money that we're getting from the TV deals. You also mentioned about schoolwork and everything else. Well, we know most athletes, and this is not an Ohio State thing, it's a national thing, are taking online classes.
Yep.
Ohio State just dropped its most recent APR report. Football was 993, which is very good out of, a possible 999. So
they're flourishing in this environment. That is,
they are flourishing in the environment. And the truth of the matter is that, yeah, I think that if they could find a way to like spread it out maybe a little bit more, as you had mentioned, when week 0 becomes the true week 1 of the season and everything else, I still think that the conference championship games are the square peg trying to go through a round hole though right now, because honestly, I don't feel that they serve a ton of purpose right now. I mean, I understand that you're going to have your top 5 conference champions, but we could go back to the point of where the conference championship is determined by the seasonal record and things of that nature, more so than a cash grab for a conference championship game. I'm not here to try and get less football. I'm already pissed off about some of the changes to speed games up and everything else. But I look at this schedule. I just wonder what is going to be the bowl week. Is it going to be the national quarterfinals? Is that going to be what kind of fits the bill of the bowl week? Hey, honey, we're going to load up the family truckster. We're going to go out for 4 days and 3 nights and be around the team and spend all this money and everything else. Because you look at the semis Thursday, Friday, you look at the championship game on a Monday, those are going to be very much more like just a mid-season week. You get in the night before the game or something like that. I mean, what is going to be the impact on the Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowl and the Rose Bowl this year? Are fans going to travel to a lot of this? Are you asking fans of teams that get out of the first round, don't have to even play in the first round, oh, you're going to have to travel 3 weeks, and you realistically could have to go to Pasadena, Miami, and Atlanta? Or I mean, there's a lot to it. So it is a made-for-TV event, and we know butts and seats are not as important to the TV networks that are paying all this money and everything else, but certainly these local economies count on that kind of money. What is that all going to end up looking like? I'm going to be very curious with it, but I also had my feet stuck into the ground over the 4-team playoff. I just felt that we were kind of getting away from things. So I'm cautiously hopeful that this 12-team situation works okay.
I don't think there's any question it's going to provide a lot of really good football games, and it's also going to provide a lot of really bad football games. That's just the nature of it because of the disparity in college football talent from the elite and then on down through the ranks. So we're going to get the opportunity to see great teams play and really good teams play in the first round that don't have a shot to win a national championship. But it's going to be a good game to see Penn State play Tennessee in the first round of a playoff, and neither one has a shot to win a national championship. So it's going to provide a lot more football, good and bad. To Kevin's point, I love the conference championship games, but in this model, they are rendered useless, basically. Does a team really want to go to a conference championship game, lose that conference championship game, having played an extra game, and it didn't help them at all? If anything, it hurt them. The conference championship games, we're getting into a situation where GOJ brought it up that a team could have to be forced to play 17 games. If you go to a conference championship game and lose, you've played 13, and then you've got a 4-game trip through the playoffs to a national championship game. That's a lot of football.
It is a lot of football, and we talk all of this about wear and tear on the players' bodies and everything else, and I don't know. I mean, I guess the argument is all right, I'll believe somebody loses their conference championship game and then goes on a 4-game winning streak when I see it. But then again, first year of the college football playoff, everybody felt that it was 3 teams, and like Ohio State came in as just, oh, whatever is the 4, and your number 4 wins the whole damn thing. So, stranger things have happened out of the gate.
I think if college football continues down the path that it's been on in regards to the elite 3 or 4 for a particular year being separated from everyone else, and it certainly looks that way based on the expansion of the Big Ten and the SEC. And if you looked at the NFL draft this year and took out Texas and Oklahoma from the Big 12 and added USC and UCLA to the Big Ten, then you were headed in that dominant 2 direction, that you're basically going to have seeds 5, 6 be better teams possibly than the conference champions from the lesser conferences. And it sets up for maybe the Big Ten and the SEC flood the quarterfinals and the semifinals. And maybe there are a lot of ugly games. I think while a lot of people have argued that this is opening up opportunities for that second tier of schools to win a national championship, I think it's done the exact opposite. It's given them a greater opportunity, obviously, to make the playoff. But the TCU of 2022 that is 1 game away from getting to a national championship, and they pull off an upset and they get there, they are not going to have that same opportunity here. They're going to have to go through a gauntlet to play in a national championship game. And to your point, Steve, the Buckeyes would have made the playoffs 20 of 25 years.
Yeah, that's about what I thought.
And the misses go to John Cooper's 99 and 2000 teams. Of course, they go to Jim Tressel's 01 and 04 teams, and the interim situation with Luke Fickell in 2011. So Ohio State would have made the last 11 straight college football playoffs. And if you take out the interim situation in 2011 with a permanent coach, they make 18 consecutive playoffs.
Wow. That's crazy. That's just, I mean, that speaks to the consistency, the level they've recruited. And you had great head coaches and great coaching staffs. I mean, Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, and Ryan Day, and all their assistants. I mean, it's been a level of excellence that, if the next 19 years are as good as the last 18 years have been, I think we're really in for something. A lot of fun times, and I think that. And that's not a knock on Cooper. I mean, he took it a step better than Earl Bruce had it. So, and then Tressel took it a notch ahead of him, and Urban took it a notch ahead of him. And now you're waiting to see if Ryan Day can take it a notch ahead of Urban Meyer. So, the jury's out on that. I readily admit that. But, I think that does speak to what we've seen, and also says that when you're in position like you were, these last 4 years with Fields and Stroud, you got to cash in. You got to cash that winning ticket, and they haven't made it to the pay window, unfortunately.
Another way to look at it is during this 9-year playoff, Ohio State has either made the playoff or they've been the first one out. They have been on that dividing line a lot. Absolutely.
It's crazy.
It is crazy to think about, and we will see how this goes forward. And to extend on the draft conversation, I meant to say this earlier when we wrapped up Ohio State's performance in the NFL draft. The Big Ten had a pretty good showing. SEC 62-55 over the Big Ten, but that gap much smaller than it's been in recent years as the SEC delivered for his 17th consecutive NFL draft, the most draftees. However, the Big Ten had 3 more than the SEC in the first 3 rounds. So at the premium levels, rounds 1, 2, and 3, the SEC 17, the Big Ten 20. So a pretty good look for the Big Ten. USC and UCLA with 8. So there's an addition there. And the Pac-12, I had the numbers in front of me at some point. I added those up, but it's not pretty for the Big 12 and the Pac-12 when you eliminate the 4 schools that they are losing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where things go. I mean, conference expansion, realignment, still can find stuff on Twitter, people talking about that. You'll have to wonder. It seems like the Big Ten doesn't want to be the one with the smoking gun in its hand to kill the Pac-12, but if the Big 12 goes and gets any of the corner schools, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, the Big Ten certainly is going to be there to try and swoop up Oregon and Washington and whatever may be there, even though the message from new Big Ten commissioner is we're just focused on integrating USC and UCLA. You can say that, and I think that that's what their goal is, but sometimes opportunity is thrust upon you, and I'm not saying that this is imminent, but certainly something to watch out for.
Kevin, I love your producer instincts and timing. We've got a Pac-12, Big 12 realignment debate coming up tonight at 8:30 Eastern right here. We're going to have our Pac-12 contingent, our Big 12 contingent, with Pac-12 believing that their league will be solidified with a new TV rights deal and their academic prowess. And then the Big 12 contingent, of course, believing that the Arizona schools, Utah, and others may be headed their way. So we will have that debate, which kicks off May as our great debate month here at the Voice of College Football.
The academic prowess. I've never turned on a game because, wow, I bet those kids are smart. That has never been the case there. And I certainly have heard a lot of things in terms of, not to get ahead of your debate on Wednesday at 8:30 Eastern time. But, I've heard a lot of things out there about, well, we're going to stick together because our schools actually play school. Well, it takes money to keep the trains going. And if you're on the CW with Live Golf and syndicated reruns of sitcoms, you're not going to get a good deal at this point. And I would really be shocked if this Pac-12 rights deal is worth a hill of beans, to be quite honest. They're kicking the can down the road. Well, guess what? None of these rights carriers are suddenly saying, well, we've changed our views. We would like to offer you even more money. They'll be fine without them. There's enough inventory out there. Nobody seems to be rushing to the negotiating table because the Pac-12 doesn't have its deal. And the Pac-12 doesn't seem to have the wherewithal to realize that maybe it's becoming DEFCON 5, maybe bringing in San Diego State and whoever's not going to excite the masses. I mean, there's not much in the Pac-12 right now outside of USC and UCLA, who will be in the Big Ten 365 days from now, that I care to watch or talk about. I don't care about non-rev sports. I certainly don't care about academic prowess. Show me the football.
Well, Kevin, I'll say it this way, that I completely agree with you. And I do think that the longer these negotiations drag out, it's only natural in negotiations that the more vulnerable of the two parties loses more the longer the negotiations drag out, because the other, as you stated, these media companies, most of them are not in the sports business. They're dabbling in the sports business. They're interested. They're obviously giving an ear. They're listening. They're negotiating. But Amazon, Apple, fill in the blank, they continue on with their business without the Pac-12. The Pac-12 needs them. They don't need the Pac-12. So that's a bad position to be in. The Pac-12 should have jumped on media rights negotiations and grabbed these spots that were available. But now the other 4 conferences have pretty much taken up the inventory and the scheduling on the big networks, and there's nothing left, and there's nothing necessarily needed. I know ESPN would probably like to have a Pac-12 game late at night on Saturday. That would be their preference over the Mountain West, but it's not a deal breaker. It's not necessary. Start Sports Center, at 11 o'clock Eastern. That's fine. Yeah. the debate or the pushback that I have to your comment about the academics, and I don't know the answer to this, is if you look at these institutions as there being a sports or football division and then the academics being separate, and we're making a decision solely on, can the football revenue from this media rights deal meet our expectations, then that's the decision to be made. Therefore, let's say these schools can run to the Big 12 and make $38 to $40 million per season, and the Pac-12 comes back with a deal that says we're making $25 million per season. So you do the math, it's easy. We're going to run for the $40 million per year, because it's not just 40 versus 25. It's over 10 years. It's 400 versus 250, and it becomes significant. Versus, I don't know if they consider that $15 million is insignificant in comparison to looking at the totality of our institutional relationships with Stanford, with Cal, and the strength of the Pac-12 academically. That's why I bring that into
Well, then they can get on the Ivy League deal or something like that and not be televised, and or on, on the Ocho or something like that. And I'm a firm supporter of saying that conference expansion is about so much more than just athletics and more than football or whatever. But the Pac-12 is kind of in survival mode at this point. You're not going out and making decisions trying to be the aggressor. You're just trying to not be relegated to the annals of history at this point. And that's kind of the issues. I don't know if the Pac-12, can sit there and say, "Oh, well, we don't like the academics. We don't want to be associated with University A and University B and University C. They don't meet our academic profile," and then throw everything out athletically at that point. So I don't know. I mean, they don't have the BTA, the Big Ten Alliance, which was formerly the CIC, in terms of how the Pac-12 is. And the truth of the matter is Cal and Stanford are not going to lose academic prestige one way or the other over this. They're still Cal and Stanford. So, I understand your point and I accept a lot of them, but I don't think that the Pac-12 is really operating from any position of power whatsoever right now.
Yeah, that's for sure. They are not. And I will restate it that any negotiations that I have had any involvement in, not that I've had involvement, but have been close to or seen from afar, there's the lesser of the two parties that's vulnerable. The more time drags on, the more desperate they become, and the worse of a situation that they're in. And we were being told months ago that the Pac-12 was weeks away from a deal, and they're still not striking a deal here in May. So those are not good signs where I stand. All right. Kevin Noon, Steve Hellwagon showing up for Buckeyes Live. We've done this 211 times, and these guys continue to deliver. So we hope you appreciate what they bring to the table. Steve, what do you have going on this week?
Not a whole hell of a lot. Trying to stay warm. We had 70-degree days here in February, and now it's May the 3rd, and the high today is going to be about 51 degrees, and it's spitting rain. And the last 2 days have been worse than that. So, yeah, I'm ready for spring. And what's going to happen, Mark, is inevitably it's going to catapult. We'll have like 2 days in the 70s, and then it'll go straight to 85. So, yeah, that's the weather here in Ohio typically. But in terms of what's going on, I'm looking at some projects for the month of May. As I said, I want to do that BCS and playoff thing over the last 25 years and count up, and basically tell everybody over the last 25 years, your team was in the top 12 at the end of the regular season 5 times. So going forward, you can expect to be in the playoff 20% of the time, that type thing. And I think that'll help illuminate for a lot of people, where this thing's happening. You can't win the national championship unless you're in the playoff. So, for a lot of these schools, I think that's going to be an eye-opening type thing. So, I think that'll be kind of cool. Really, I don't have a whole heck of a lot else going on. I'm trying to think, racking my brain, what else really happens here in the month of May. We'll have recruiting camps in the month of June that'll keep us busy over at Ohio State. So that'll be interesting. But otherwise, it's kind of quiet right now.
Well, I got to think that Penn State's at the top of your list. They got to be applauding this 12-team playoff, and whoever's taking their turn is the second tier in the SEC, LSU, Florida, whoever it is for that period of time. Those are the ones that are going to benefit mostly from this expansion. Kevin.
Yeah, just put up a Big Me kickoff podcast yesterday, a live show. Probably do one more podcast this week, getting ready for all the recruiting camps. Even more so than the ones at Ohio State. The big Under Armour camp is this weekend on Sunday in Columbus. I'll be at that. And did anybody say Southern Swing? That may be coming up here too. So keep it locked into Buckeye Huddle to find out when Mark Gibler and myself will be on the road and heading south to go check out some of Ohio State's top targets and commits.
Nice.
Mark, I want to note, I have never worked at the same place as Kevin has, but I have always volunteered to go along on the Southern Swing, not drive, because I really don't want to drive, but I'll go along, interview the guys, and I've even agreed, since they set it all up, that I'll hold my interview for like an extra couple of hours until their stuff is out there, and then I would post my stuff. I just want to tag along and see what happens on the Southern Swing. So, again, the offer's still there. I don't want to drive. I don't want to drive.
I'm bringing nothing to the table except in-car hilarity.
I don't want to drive from Alabama or from Atlanta down to Jacksonville and on down to Fort Lauderdale. I don't want to drive a 6-hour shift or anything like that. I just want to sit in the back seat, keep you and Gibler company, keep your, pass the pop up, whatever, just kind of,
pop. I thought you said something else.
Not the pot. No, not the pot. The Cheetos, whatever, just keep the, you got to have a backseat person that kind of keeps it all, kind of still going, but I don't want to drive, but it'd be fun. So
I'll keep it in mind.
Okay.
This journey seems ready-made for some kind of vlog, some kind of video, whatever they call it.
That's what we need. Is we need the video of the making of the Southern Swing,
the hilarity
behind the scenes of the Southern Swing.
Exactly.
The hilarity.
Well,
you mean we're going to be stuck here for 2 hours? on I-95, there's a oil rig.
Trust me, we have managed to. We've been very lucky through the years that Waze has jumped us off the interstate just in a nick of time to avoid some shutdowns like that.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And from what I see on social media, there are other shutdowns on highways that we can expect these days. All right, Kevin, when does this begin?
We don't announce it. So
okay.
Keep an eye. It's called a deep tease. It's a deep tease. We don't announce it. You'll know when we hit our first stop.
Awesome. Kevin Noon, Buckeye Huddle, and Steve Hellwagon, Buck Nuts, always here delivering Ohio State football for us. We'll see you next, most likely, folks. Here's the deal, next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. But hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live so you can keep up with our schedules for Buckeyes Live. We will see you next week.